Hi, everyone. I am Jen Walton. I'm the founder of Girls Who Chase, and I just wanted to quickly introduce Girls Who Chase. For those of you who are not familiar and who came to us from the communities of one of our wonderful panelists, Girls Who Chase is an initiative founded in early 22 that was born out of the storm chasing community. It has now become a global phenom with hundreds of contributors, a sea of fantastic partners and educators, and an exceptionally supportive and thriving community. And we're so honored to be working closely with the American Meteorological Society to bring more women into weather and bring more storm chasing to you all, including today's panel. The goals of Girls Who Chase is to diversify the face of weather, and we really do mean that literally in every sense, and the sciences. And our mission is to inspire, empower, and equip girls and women to pursue storms, the sciences, and their passions. And how we go about doing that is we raise visibility of women in the weather space and ensure representation as a media platform. That means we partner with organizations and networks to get more women on air, amplify voices, and help dissolve those cultural stereotypes. We also produce our own media, telling important stories on the podcast and boosting content on our social media channels. We provide accessible educational resources and trainings that includes both adult and K-12 resources, both of which are still under development. But right now we're producing the popular virtual Storm Chasing 101 training we call Spring Training, and we'll tell you about that in just a second. And finally, we foster supportive, welcoming community. So just a note about spring training. We got a lot of questions from you all regarding how to get started storm chasing. How do you know what you need to know in order to make storm chasing decisions? How do you forecast? How do you know where weather's going to be? Spring training is a wonderful way to get that information, to train yourself, to learn more about weather forecasting and what decision making goes into storm chasing. And we've got a QR code here for you if you're interested. As far as we know, it's the first comprehensive storm chasing 101. It's fully remote. We record everything. So if for some reason you can't make it on March 1st, that's okay. We will have all of the resources to you if you register anyway. And there's lots of presentations that are relevant, including things like storm spotting and structure, how to read radar and satellite, etc. We also have 2 all-female panels. Oops, and I just exited myself right out of it. But anyway, you got the point. I'll put it back up in the middle. 2 all-female panels, kind of like this one. And our event production partner is Comet's MedEd program, which is a really well-known meteorology education program. So I am now going to hand it off to our panel. We don't want to waste any more time with introductions. We know a lot of you follow these folks on social media or have seen them on television, or you might be brand new to weather entirely, and you're here with us today, but you maybe saw the movie Twisters and you were inspired to make your move into weather. So we hope today will help you get a running start into the worlds of meteorology and storm chasing. Each of these panelists is an expert in a different weather-related area, but is also a storm chaser. So we get to talk about all of these things bundled into one. We're going to have each of them introduce themselves for about a couple minutes, and then we'll jump right in with your questions. So let's go ahead and get started with Ginger.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jen. I'm really honored to be here because just the fact that we have a group called Girls Who Chase would have been so big back when I wanted to do nothing but chase. I obviously went to school to storm chase. I went to a Valparaiso University. They had a storm intercept team. They had a storm chasing fraternity. I was a part of all of it because that's all I ever wanted to do. I had fallen in love with weather when I was young, 8 or 9 years old, and then didn't really understand what that would look like. I definitely did not want to be one of those people talking about it on TV because why would I want to do that? And I was really adverse to that. So when I saw the movie Twister, the original, that Helen Hunt character really was the image of what I wanted. I was like, wow, that's me. I want to chase tornadoes. This is it. I'm going to go and find a job that I can do that. So went to Valpo, studied meteorology. In there, I had a professor, John Knox, who's still at UGA, and he encouraged me to check out an internship in television. And I got an internship with the one and only James Spann, who's a wonderful meteorologist in broadcasting. And he really showed me that there was something there, beyond what I had seen from just sitting on the other side of the television. And I fell in love with the communication of the science, but I didn't ever stop wanting and needing to storm chase, because I think, and I always say, I don't think a meteorologist can understand the atmosphere unless you've smelled it, tasted it, felt it, been all parts of it. And I often liken it to maybe a doctor who just reads in books and doesn't have a patient to be able to learn on. So I just fell in love with it. The combination of those two things is really what I've been able to do throughout my career. I've been extremely fortunate, but also extremely hardworking to be able to get to this place. And I think there's a lot that happens along the way. And having Karen there in the car is so apropos, because I will also be on Helene come tomorrow. I had a lot of New York Climate Week events, and so I'm delaying my travel as much as I possibly can to get in place for the storm. But we usually are. I mean, and that's the other thing I'll just end on. As much as I love, now my broadcasting side, my chasing and science side is the base of me. It is everything that I've ever wanted. And, if I got into TV for glamour, it's not it. Like at the same, I'm going to be brushing my teeth outside of an SUV by Thursday morning. Or Friday morning. So that's just, you have to love it. And I think if you're here, you probably do. So you're in the right place to learn a lot from some of the absolute best in the industry. I'm looking forward to hearing everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Ginger. I'll hand it off now to Elizabeth Leitman. Hi, Liz.
Hello. Really happy to be here. Thank you. So a little bit about me. I am a forecaster at the Storm Prediction Center, and I have been there for almost 15 years now. So my career in forecasting severe storms is, it's been a while. But I originally became interested in weather through a fear of weather when I was a little girl. I grew up in Illinois, so we had our fair share of severe storms. And, my mom didn't want me to be afraid. So she took me to the library. We checked out all the kids' books we could find on weather, and that kind of turned it into an obsession. And I think that story is probably relatable for a lot of people who end up being kind of obsessed with weather. And so, like Ginger, when I was a kid, I knew I wanted to do something with weather, but I wasn't really sure how to make it happen. And then the original Twister movie came out, and we saw Jo, and it's like, I want to be her. And so from, the time that I was in middle school, the only place I wanted to be was Oklahoma. And so I applied to go to school at OU, attended OU, got my degree, spent time storm chasing as a student. And then I joined the National Weather Service, spent some time in Billings, Montana, and Louisville, Kentucky as a forecaster before I found my way back to SPC, because that was really my dream job from the time I was a teenager. And so, I'm lucky to be able to say that I'm living the dream. I don't get to storm chase as often these days, because most of the times those events that you all are out there chasing, I am working in operations. However, living in central Oklahoma, there's usually a handful of days a year where I don't have to go anywhere because the weather comes to me. I've seen more tornadoes from the National Weather Center than I probably have out chasing. So, it's kind of, it's a fascinating place to be, and just really happy to be here and answer some questions about meteorology careers.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. Melanie, I'll hand it off to you with the beautiful tornado in the background. Relevant.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and present with all of these other amazing women in the meteorology field. This tornado here is actually from a chase in 2004 in Iowa. I'll be honest, I actually when I was younger, I dreamed of having a job like Elizabeth or Karen. I really wanted to work at the Storm Prediction Center or be on the Dow research team. That was like super exciting. I loved all the science behind storms and weather. But when it really started for me was when I was really young. I also, like many other people, I remember from the age of like 6 years old, I was dreaming about tornadoes. I have no idea why, because I lived in Arizona. We had great monsoons and lightning storms out there, but I don't know where this fascination with tornadoes came from. It was just something I always dreamed about. My dreams actually used to be more based on fear, but also fascination. As I got older and got more involved with the weather, the science, and eventually storm chasing, those dreams shifted to more of the kind of dream where I see a tornado and my camera's not working, or my car won't start, so I can't go chase it. So I'm not sure what all that is about, but I know other chasers have had similar experiences. My background is actually my degree is in biomedical science and chemistry. I also studied meteorology while I was in college. So I learned how to forecast, and I even took a couple specialized severe weather forecasting classes so that I could understand the science behind severe weather, as well as how to do my own forecasting. So when I chase, I do my own forecasting. I ended up partnering with Peggy Willenberg, as maybe some of you know. We became known somehow as the Twister Sisters in the early 2000s, and we were really just pursuing what we love. Photography is another passion of mine, so I combined that with the storm chasing and really focused on creating content, videos, and photography before social media was a thing. So back then it was a lot different than it is today. Now we've all got phones where we can take amazing pictures of storms, so we're seeing a lot more out there, which is pretty awesome. Peggy and I ended up having a show called The Twister Sisters, as was mentioned in the introduction, and that was on the WE channel, Women's Entertainment Network, in 2008. And since then, I've really just been out more chasing on my own and working on content production and just following my dreams as far as enjoying the weather and just the chase and the photography of chasing. As far as a career, I've done a lot of photography work. I worked as a chemist and a lot of other things along the way. But my passion still lies in photography, and I love photographing the weather, as well as I do enjoy weddings and portraits and other type of work as well. So I'm excited to be here, especially to discuss and talk about weather and storm chasing with all the amazing people on this panel who I honestly did dream about being in those roles at some point in my life as well. I just ended up on my own path, and here we are. So thank you for having us today.
It was still an important path, for sure. Thanks, Melanie. And Karen, last but not least, maybe you could explain to us why you're navigating in a vehicle right now.
Yeah, sorry about that. We're stationary now. Hi, I'm Karen Kosiba. I guess my official title is Managing Director of the Dow facility, but I don't know what that really means. But basically what I do is I do a lot of research, and I do a lot of field research, both my own field research, which my passion is tornadoes. That's why I'm on this panel. But doing research to understand the low-level wind structure in tornadoes really is how I got into this field. But I branched out to hurricanes, which is where I am now, somewhere in the Florida Panhandle, looking for sites to put radar trucks, to do more field research to look at low-level winds and hurricanes. There's a theme there. So I got involved in meteorology. I love listening to how everybody gets involved in storm chasing and meteorology. We're all sort of similar but different. I always think, it's funny, like you don't really know where you're gonna end up in life. It's not like I'm like, what I really like to do is, I don't know, sit in a Dow and collect data in the low levels of tornadoes. I don't know if I said that when I was 5, but I certainly was interested in weather when I was 5. And I actually went to school for physics and thought I'd be a physicist. No, I thought I'd be like a patent lawyer or a veterinarian or something. But as all people who like a lot of things but don't know what to target really for a career, I kept sort of following things I like doing slowly but surely. So I went to get my master's degree in physics, but I actually was doing laboratory modeling of tornadoes while I was doing that. So starting to get there. And in terms of trying to learn laboratory modeling and tornado dynamics and applying that to real world tornadoes, I really got fascinated with so much that we didn't know about what's happening in the low levels near the surface, which impacts people. And I really am interested in that. So I went then to get my PhD in meteorology. And one thing I knew I didn't want to do is sit in front of a computer all day. I wanted to get out in the field. So haha, joke's on me. I still sit in front of a computer all day. It's just a radar truck, or no, still in an office. I still sit in front of computers all day. But so I was really lucky. I got the opportunity right away when I was getting my PhD to go out and work with the mobile radar trucks and collect data in low levels in tornadoes. So that was great. I've been doing this with the Dow since 2004. As I like to say, I never left, but I certainly really enjoy what I'm doing and keep, thinking of new research ideas, thinking of new things to do. The other really cool thing about my job is that not just tornadoes and hurricanes, things that I'm passionate about, I get to do other people's passions. So hailstorms, winter weather. I get to see all that type of weather and think about the science about that. But without the burden of having to, come up with a clever research idea and write a paper. So I think that's really great that I get to see all that's going on in the field, but yet still be able to focus on my passion.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much. And I know we're going to cover a wide range of topics in this conversation, but I want to kick off with one that got a lot of attention right off in our submissions form. And that is, and by the way, just a reminder, folks, we took questions in advance using a form. So that's what we'll be presenting today. So apologies for those of you who showed up with questions. Hopefully we could do this again in the future, but right now we'll be covering questions that were submitted on the form that we used when we were advertising the event. So lots of questions around how to get your foot in the door in the weather community. How do you get started with a job in weather? And I would add a secondary, which is we have a lot of folks who don't necessarily have meteorology degrees. So if you have any suggestions about opportunities for those who may not have a meteorology degree, as well as those who are going through the formal academic training, that would be wonderful. And maybe let's kick it off with Liz.
Sure. So my path was pretty traditional, getting into a meteorology career. So, I had the passion, I knew what I wanted to do. I applied to college to get my meteorology degree because I knew the job that I wanted in the weather service would require that. So my path was pretty traditional. So if you are on that path, and say you're in high school, getting ready to, start applying to colleges, or you're an undergrad in school, I do have some tips for you because the job market is very competitive, especially in the weather service. So if that's the path that you're thinking about, a really important thing is to make yourself known, become a known entity. And so things like reaching out to your local NWS office and asking if you can come take a tour, or if they provide opportunities for students to shadow a forecaster. I did a tour of my local NWS office, which the St. Louis office, whenever I was in high school. Whenever I visited Norman, looking at OU as a college, I visited SPC in the Severe Storms Lab. And then as a student, I applied for a student job with the Oklahoma Climate Survey, and did that for about 3 years. I also volunteered at the Norman NWS office for about 2.5 years before I graduated. And then attending conferences when you can. A lot of meteorology degree programs have money. AMS offers student scholarships, things like that, so that you can attend the AMS conference. And so making yourself a known entity is huge whenever your resume comes to a hiring manager's desk. And so it shows initiative, that you're really interested and passionate, and those are the people that we want to work with. And so that's a really big one. Just getting involved and networking and making yourself known. It can be very intimidating. I totally understand that, because we all kind of had people in the field that we, looked up to, and approaching those people can be scary. But we've all been where, budding meteorologists, or storm chasers are, before. So we understand, and most of us are very, enthusiastic about getting to know you and helping you along your path.
And I would totally second that. I think everyone in this group is really passionate about mentoring and answering questions and supporting folks moving into these careers. So please don't hesitate to reach out and ask for what you want. Ginger, I see some enthusiastic nodding over there.
Yes.
What have you got to add?
It's funny because I will be honest, it's the part that I was the most fearful of. And if I'm really honest, it's the part that I'm still most fearful of. And it's still hard because the last thing I wanted, and this I've learned about, but the last thing I wanted back in those days was to look like I didn't know what I was doing. You're not supposed to know what you're doing. That's actually the whole point. So I think that's something I always tell myself I would go back and change, is ask a million questions. Make sure to realize that you deserve to ask that question, because most of us love talking about ourselves in our lives. Like, we're ready to help you. I think that I didn't understand that for the very longest time. And so I agree that it's making yourself known, but it's just figuring out what you like too. I also went and shadowed at National Weather Service offices. We often talk about the moment Samantha Winneck, who I work with for the last 13 years. I actually met her before I started at ABC. I had gotten the job and I met her at a storm chasing, it wasn't a conference. It was just a meeting for storm chasers. And she saw me and she had recognized me from Twitter. Like, this is a long time ago. And she came over, and you talk about shy. My little Sam was so shy. She had just graduated college, but she came over because she recognized me and she said, "Hi, I just graduated from Penn State. I have a meteorology degree." And I was like, "Well, what are you going to do?" I got very curious. And she said, I don't know. And I was like, "Do you want to be in broadcasting? Is that like why you're?" She's like, "No, I definitely don't want to be on TV." And I was like, "Well, what do you want to do?" She said, I think it would be cool to be a weather producer." And I was like, "Nobody says that." I was like, "Really? You do?" So I said, when I start my new job, why don't you come job shadow? She job shadowed. She worked for free for 6 months before there was a position open. And now she's been with us for 12 years. And she's flown around the world with me to see wildfires, in Australia, and chased not just storms, but had this like unbelievable career. So what if that one moment she wouldn't have walked over and said, "Hi, I'm Sam"? And I think taking that one moment, I mean, that's scary. It's almost too much responsibility, right? Because then, but that's how easy it is to essentially change your life. So I think that what's hard is in my, where we work, we really do hire degreed meteorologists for both the producer end and on television. I think that's very much the case now, but I can't say that in other parts of TV that if you were interested or wanted to get, that you couldn't start that way and find a way in and then potentially get that degree as you go, like that could also be a route that you take, and you won't know any of that until you ask. And I think that's the thing, is just not to be afraid, not to be embarrassed or ashamed of any of that. Because if Sam hadn't, sometimes I think she regrets it now because it's been a lot for 13 years. But we really have had this beautiful run, and she did the right thing. And I go back to that. And it's funny because whenever people write me, they'll be like, "Oh, I'm in New York. Would you ever have someone come shadow?" And if the studio is open enough that we can do it, I say yes all the time. And she'll be like, "Oh my gosh," because usually she has to like do the security part and like whatever. And so she's like, "Ginger," and I'm like, "How'd you get here?" And then she's like, "You're right. Okay." So it's a good lesson to remember that it just, you never know who you can reach out to. And it could be a DM, it could be anything. And who could then help catapult that next part of your career. Don't be afraid, and don't be ashamed to reach and reach out and shake hands. That conference, like you said, I had no idea how, like, it makes sense. They're weather conferences, they're chasing conferences, like, go there. You get all of that. You don't have to DM everyone. You get to shake their hand. And that's the best form.
That's such a great point. and it's actually part of why Girls Who Chase exists, because there's this perception, I think, that introducing yourself to storm chasers or weather experts is very intimidating. And I hope that everyone is kind of listening to what the experts here are saying today, in that there are lots of different ways, but the easiest one and the simplest one is to just ask. I think folks are more than interested and happy to answer questions and talk to you about their career and brainstorm with you. One area I know a lot of folks are interested in getting into, especially with the movie Twisters out and refreshing us about field going research and people who get up and close and personal to tornadoes, especially after some of the events of 2024, is the Doppler on Wheels program and some of the field going work that Karen Kosiba does. So Karen, what are your thoughts about something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all obviously very great answers. I mean, the one thing I think too is to be persistent. Don't take it personally. I haven't emailed you back. I'm guessing I'm dropping a lot of emails this week while I'm out of the office. So be persistent. If you want to work with somebody, keep emailing, keep trying to get in contact with them. It's usually not personal that they're not getting back to you, and that really helps me when people are persistent. I also think, showing up and sort of doing all the jobs, field work is a lot of different jobs. And a lot of them are driving and, doing all sorts of, stuff that people, the mundane tasks. And I think, when you sign up for field work, you're sort of signing up to do all of this stuff. And the people who are enthusiastic doing all this stuff, sort of day in and day out, are the people, you want to keep working with. And when people volunteer, or people sometimes are able to, get internships, those people really stand out. The people that show up every day with a good attitude, and are sort of willing to do all the stuff. That's really, really a good thing for a teammate and somebody, think of who you want to be out in the field with. Those are the people that, you want to surround yourself with. And those are the people that are very enthusiastic about getting on the team.
The number of areas of expertise I witnessed come into play as part of the Dow team this summer, be surprised how many different types of folks would be more than welcomed.
Yeah, and just to say that too. Yeah, sorry, I didn't really say that. I mean, you don't have to have a degree in meteorology. I mean, there's all sorts of paths to be in the weather field. You can be good with computers, good with communication, good with technology. So I wouldn't let that be an inhibitor. Obviously, if there's specific jobs you're looking to get, some of them, like Liz said, they actually do have very specific requirements, but some don't. And really, you could be interested in weather and not have a degree in meteorology. You could do something adjacent to that. So I think there's a broad range of what makes, good meteorologists and good field meteorologists, and that always doesn't equate to a specific degree.
Got it. And this is going to transition us into our next question. And so I'll just double up here with Melanie a little bit. Because Annie G wanted to know, what advice would you give to someone interested in becoming a storm chaser? So let's talk, Mel, a little bit about some of the expertise that goes into storm chasing and how to maybe get to be part of the community, and what does breaking into storm chasing look like?
Well, these days, honestly, I think it's a lot easier to get involved with storm chasing and to learn and connect with the other storm chasers in the storm chasing community. Back when I started, like I mentioned before, there was no social media available, so it was only people in my state that eventually I connected with, and it was really hard to really know what to do. I ended up taking classes so I could learn about forecasting, and then taking actually a spotter class from the National Weather Service is very helpful. It's usually a 1 day. I think you can do it online now, right? Like Skywarn classes are really good as far as at least familiarizing yourself with severe weather structure and what you want to report to the National Weather Service and what things look like. First, I want to mention while I'm talking about this part of it is that as much studying as I did in the classroom and reading, nowadays you can go on YouTube and find all kinds of educational videos, like from Tornado Titans, to learn some basics about severe weather, about forecasting, and about storm structure. But as much as you do that, when you actually get in the field, it is very different. And I'll never forget when I first went out in the field to chase, I actually did try to connect with other people. So nowadays, connecting with people on Facebook, follow other storm chasers and message them, get involved with Girls Who Chase to connect with other chasers. It's really helpful to go out with other people who are experienced, whether that's another chaser who's willing to let you come along or follow them, or if you have the opportunity to sign up with a storm chasing tour group, that can be really helpful as well. I was lucky in that actually the Doppler on Wheels team, and Josh Werman was there, Sean Casey was with them at the time doing an IMAX film thing. They actually allowed me to follow them for a few days on one of their trips, and that was one of my first experiences in the field. So I got to listen to these experts doing their forecasting. They let me be involved with their discussions, and it was really exciting. So as was already mentioned, just reach out and ask people if you can follow or be involved and learn from them. And also, I do encourage, as I mentioned, taking classes, whether you can take a forecasting class anywhere in a college or just the Skywarn class is very helpful. But just taking it one step at a time. And as Jen had mentioned, this Girls Who Chase spring training event is very helpful. That's in March 1st, I believe, this coming year, where you can get kind of a sampling of different aspects of storm chasing. So not just the forecasting piece, but also what it's like to be in the field, because it's very important to understand that in order to stay safe when you get out there to chase storms. So to get started, it really is connecting with the community, getting involved with classes, and reaching out and just asking. And I would like to mention that, as Karen said, don't take it personally if people don't get back to you. I probably am one of the worst at responding to messages on Facebook. Once in a while, I'll go in there and I'll respond. But so reach out in various ways. It's easier to get in touch with me if you actually send an email or even a text message to my phone. Now that might sound a little personal, but that's how I respond better, is through a phone message or an email rather than social media. Maybe because I'm a little more old school, I'm a little older, so I'm not quite as on top of my social media accounts like a lot of younger people are. Yeah, is that a good enough answer for the question?
Yeah, we've got a follow-on question that I want to make sure we mention here because it's relevant to careers, and that is from Cassidy G. How can you make a career in storm chasing dependable and sustainable? And a follow-on to that is, have you been able to incorporate your photography into the storm chasing career? And I'm gonna start with Melanie, and then I'll hand this off to a couple of other folks because this is an interesting question that I wanted to make sure we touch on in this conversation.
Yeah, I'll start with mentioning that there are some people who do actually make a career out of storm chasing. They make a sustainable income. What I have seen is it can take a very long time. These days, of course, there's more opportunity with things such as YouTube and content creation. But even trying to get into those fields, like in that area, can be very difficult. I will mention Ryan Hall has actually been successful with creating his own career through YouTube. And, people who do that actually really have to pay attention to how to build a YouTube career, not just, I want to go storm chasing and post my pictures on YouTube or my videos. I post my videos. I don't have a huge following. And the algorithms, understanding all that, it's really, you have to approach it as a business, as someone once told me, if you want to make money from doing this. And I'm not the best at that, so I haven't made it a career. I call it a hobby. I have made some money along the way. Storm chasing is expensive, so a lot of that money just goes towards paying my expenses. Even in the TV show that I was involved with, it wasn't a huge amount of money that I made. Not everyone who's on TV makes a lot of money. So it's really difficult to turn it into a career, but it can be done. And if you really have to commit to it and devote a lot of time, build your base, be authentic and good at what you do. Obviously, a lot of people know of Reed Timmer, who is also, he's a meteorologist, but has turned his storm chasing into a career through social media. Yeah, it's very difficult, and it's not something I actually strive to do, but I do like to approach it as, this is my passion, and I'd like to make a little money from it. And you can definitely do that, not only through the social media aspect, but also selling your video to news networks, which is actually more difficult to make money doing nowadays because there's so much video out there. But that is still a way I make a little bit of money. And as far as incorporating my photography, there are several ways to do that. You can create calendars, which I do, and I make a little money that way. Create photography, table books. I know someone, David Mayhew, actually, for many years has created or taken his photography and gone to various shows around the United States, just art fairs basically. And he makes a living doing that. So it is possible to, depending where you want to go and what approach you want to take, but you can sell your photography through those art shows, trying to sell them online. I have a website where I have a store, so people can go and buy photos directly from that website. And that's actually what led me to selling one of my tornado photographs to the producers of a movie called 13 Minutes. And they used that photograph in their poster for their movie. And that was probably the most exciting moment in my career as far as, or hobby career rather, as far as storm chasing and photography go, because to see my photo used in a movie poster, and now even on Amazon, I see 13 Minutes and there's my tornado. They made a composite with a different foreground, but that's actually the tornado I photographed. And so I have a commercial license. You can sell, so people can use your work commercially or just personally. It's obviously a lot cheaper that way. They just want to hang the artwork on their wall rather than using it in something like that. So I have incorporated the photography in that way and selling prints, and then through fate, and also having my website and my store online, I was able to connect with people looking for commercial sales as well.
Awesome. I think the short version of this too is just, it is tough to make storm chasing a career, and takes time and investment, probably of your own resources and your own expertise. And we don't necessarily recommend finishing high school and jumping into storm chasing. Like maybe look into a job or developing some other areas of expertise as well as that while you're at it. But there are ways to do it, especially if you're creative, and find different ways to present yourself in the universe. But definitely go into it with eyes open. And one way for sure as well, if you want to be out in the field, is probably to contribute to field research, and developing, data sets, building data sets, and helping knowledge of field data on a variety of different topics, right, Karen?
That's my cue. And sorry, I moved outside because I was roasting in the car, but now it's kind of noisy. Obviously research is one avenue of meteorology. And again, I think, as I sort of mentioned, there's a lot of ways to be involved in research. Certainly you could be, developing your own research projects, and you have, your own ideas, and you're writing grants to fund those ideas, and fund the data collection. But it's a team, it's a team effort. It's not, just one individual person. So people out there, helping, keeping the radars up and running and maintaining them between projects, operating them during projects. So there's a lot that goes into field collection. I always say too, sometimes collecting the data is the easy part. There's a lot that goes into the analysis of the data. People are always so surprised, you're like, oh, you finished Vortex 2 and the first publication came out 3 years later. Yeah, because, you have to look at the data that you got. You have to quality control the data. You have to work that data and see if it fits into, what you're out there investigating. So there's a lot of years spent actually looking at the data and formulating ideas, from that data, formulating results. So it's quite the process, but again, it's also a team effort. So you don't have to be the lead researcher out there writing the proposals. There's certainly a lot of people who are contributing to that team.
Any thoughts on this, Ginger, since you've been kind of weaving in and out of different types of chasing for quite a while?
Yeah, I think that I definitely, saw myself in that research role originally. And so when I wasn't, I think the most important part was that I always kept it as something I needed to do. And I made that known everywhere I went, because there are not a ton of broadcast meteorologists who have, or more importantly, do regularly chase. And I think as I went through my career, it made me stand out. It made me different. And like I mentioned before, I think it made me the best meteorologist that I could be. And so I think that's how I usually, and I say it 10 times a day to people. I constantly inform why because that's such a, cliche question when people are on TV. They're like, oh, you guys have to be standing in the storm. And for one thing, I have like very safe thresholds of what I will stand in, because I'm not out there to die, right? I'm there to be, first of all, getting there well before, so we can put gravity to it and say we have a Cat 3, making landfall in Florida. But then, so the warning part of it, the storytelling part, which is the human impact, which is the all important part, but also the why of why I've done this keeps evolving. And I think now we have so many layers of being a conduit of climate science is the next part of it. And so I have my ability to storm chase or experience storm chasing everywhere I went, even when I was in Chicago, and nobody there in the meteorologies, in any of the meteorologists that had been on television, they definitely were not going and chasing. I was like, can I go out to this, tornado in Romeoville, whatever? And they'd be like, what? Usually you guys don't walk away from the green screen. And so I tried to make that a huge part of everything I did. And in my job prior to that, there was an opportunity to go cover what would become Hurricane Katrina. We didn't really know what it would be when I went down there, and I was covering it for like it was called Lynn Television, like 16 TV stations, and they could have used anyone to report on what had happened in the storm. But I knew that was something I needed to do. And that was my first big storm that I had covered. And I really did sit outside Gulfport. So I wasn't like what I do now necessarily, but as I saw the evolution happening, and I saw how important it was to tell the stories of the humans, because that's really what the storm was about. And so I think all of that, I just think that the storm chasing, I wasn't ever going to let it go. That's what I wanted to do. And I've just kind of weaved it in to the career that doesn't naturally always go that way. And now we're at the point where I'm still relatively unique. There are very few meteorologists who have, and definitely at some of the higher levels, that have ever done it, if not, or they want to do it. And like, I not only want to do it, sometimes my meteorologists that I work with that are back in the studio making graphics and such, they're like, it's a tropical storm. You really want to go? I'm like, well, yeah, kind of. Yes, I do. But I mean, obviously, I weigh out impacts and, who's going, if they're going to have 35 inches of rain in North Carolina or South Carolina. Yeah, no, I'm going to be there because I still get to study it, and that passion never goes away. So.
Anything to add to that, Liz? The thing I kind of keep going back to is the relationship that gets established between National Weather Service, Storm Prediction Center folks, and chasers, and that important role of reporting, which isn't a job and doesn't pay, but is probably more important, I would say, than any of the rest of it. So any thoughts about that, or anything else that you feel like folks missed?
Yeah, I just think, when we're working a severe event, we're looking at Twitter, we're looking at chaser live streams, things like that. So that is another basically data source for us, to give us real-time verification, what's happening on the ground. And that type of information is extremely valuable for us to consider how an event is evolving. What are we going to do downstream? Things like that. And so while in my job, I don't have the opportunity to go out into the field and chase myself a lot, we still are very connected with the community and very aware of what's going on, because we use your information. And so that's very important to what the Weather Service does. It's an integral part of the weather enterprise.
It doesn't pay, but it's the most gratifying in my
opinion. It doesn't pay, but it's valuable.
Yes. So while we're kind of on the topic, actually, I've got a question here from Irene for Ginger and Liz in particular, and that is, what is the most challenging part of your job during an ongoing severe weather event? So we're looking at one pending here shortly, so probably using hurricanes as context. What would you say is the most challenging element? And Ginger, I know that's very much on your mind right now. So let's start with
I've been interrupted 7 times for logistical planning. Yes, I would say that. Gosh, I think probably the biggest as I go through life, and this was asked a little bit earlier, is like you really have to figure out priorities, right? And when someone says storm chasing as a career, I think you are very driven by storms. And so if your child has they're starring in their school play and it happens to be on the day of a Cat 5, it's really difficult. And you have to figure out what those priorities are, stick to your boundaries, and make sure that that is known by all around you, because it gets really mishmashed. As much as I love every storm, with personal life, I've been really good about being like, nope, can't do it. It actually doesn't matter what category the storm is. I'm not going if X is happening. But, if I go back to Ian, for example, we had, granted, I have told my in-laws, like, August through October is not great. Like, but they planned a party for my husband's birthday, which happens to be on September 10th, which is the peak of hurricane season, in Arizona. And we were all meant to fly there and do this long 4-day weekend. And it was, of course, when Hurricane Ian happened. And so in my, career, I've made choices sometimes, like in that one, we knew it was going to be pretty bad. And I also know that I have a responsibility. So I said to them, I want to be there before, I want to be there during. Ben and the kids are going to fly themselves down there, but I need to make the actual like Saturday night party, which it was over on a Thursday. So it was really, I had to cover it on Friday, and it wasn't like missing that much, but I still would have stayed and covered it much longer. Like, we know how impactful Ian was. But there's a lot of people use the word balance. It's not balance. It's like, oh crap, what am I going to do next? Like, I got to figure out this one. And so I think I can't remember what the original question was, but I felt very like compelled to tell everyone there's a lot of sacrifice, because you are at the mercy of nature. You don't have a schedule. You can't have a schedule. I talk to my therapist about this all the time. If you have any control issue, that you got to work on it now, because you're not going to be able to have control, and you have to release that. And then you also have to create those boundaries yourself. We need that in life, but I think especially with a job like this, and I see a lot of the online chasers, and I see a lot of this, like, it's driven by the want to succeed and the want to get to that next storm and not miss it. And you feel really confined because there's only a couple of months where it's going to be this good. And I think it's very easy to get wrapped up into that is all that life is. And I do it a lot. I have to have people around me that help me to step back and see the big picture and realize, even if I wouldn't have gone to Ian, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. It doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't make you a better meteorologist. All of that has to be remembered. But I see them, and I almost feel very motherly, where I want to reach out and be like, you don't have to go. Like, don't drive overnight. Not a good idea. Nobody cares if, but then especially if they're driven by the financial gain potentially from it, I think that gets really scary. So that's why it's important to have that depth of where you can do it, but you don't have to, and knowing when that don't have to is.
Oh, that's a big one. That's a big one and an important one, and entirely related to the question. And totally agree on all fronts. I've seen that from all directions and all different types of weather-related careers.
That is the biggest challenge. It is the biggest challenge every single time, because all the other stuff doesn't really matter after that. There's a lot of things that I find myself in this field, or, we're doing every single hour on our streaming, and then these people want this and this affiliate wants this, and it can get very stressful, but that's all like manageable. And also I'm already there. It's actually the easiest time because I know what I'm doing. I know everything about the storm. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel really in my pocket there. It's the before and sometimes
Yeah.
the after. And it's those feelings and emotions that go around that and the rest of life.
And there will always be weather. And Liz, we don't have to talk about hurricanes. I know I've heard you talk a couple of times about tornado outbreaks and some of the major events that you've participated in. So feel free to choose whatever example you prefer.
Sure. So there's a couple of things. One would be if there's, a risk, especially at the higher ends, potential tornado outbreaks, that is for the area that you live. So there have been times where I'm going in to work an event that is forecast for central Oklahoma, where my family is. And that is incredibly stressful to be away from my kids. Whenever I know from experience the poor outcomes that can come from those types of events if things happen just right, and so having to maintain your focus on the weather, the observations, creating products, issuing watches and mesoscale discussions and things like that, while also being worried, is my family going to be safe? Is my house going to be hit? Are we going to have to evacuate ops and shelter? That's a huge stress. And that's definitely hard to deal with. Otherwise, other big events that happen that aren't necessarily where I am, but have a huge societal impact, things like, the super outbreak in the Southeast in 2011, or the Joplin tornado, or the Moore 2013 tornado, which was nearby. Dealing with the mental aspect after those events happen, even though you weren't there, you forecast these events, and that even if you make the perfect forecast and everything is communicated well, all of the warnings are issued perfectly, everything in the process from watch to warning goes how it's supposed to, that in those types of events, there are still going to be lives lost. And that can be really difficult to cope with afterwards, because the point of my job is to protect life and property, right? And you do your best, and that you probably helped save some lives, but then you see these poor outcomes, and that can hurt a little. And so dealing kind of with that secondary trauma related to those events can be difficult. And a lot of ways that we do that, like in ops, there's a lot of talk and discussion about that, things that we could have done differently, or ideas for the future. How can we improve the watch to warning system? Things like that helps you process. But during the event, you're kind of in the zone and you kind of get tunnel vision. You're keyed in on the data and what's happening, but it's the aftermath. It's the things that come after that can be really challenging.
And can I just tag on, only because that's why I guess I had said it's the before, but it's the after. And I think that you're right. There's inevitably, and if you don't attend to that part of your job, that there is and if you're not seeing a therapist regularly, I think you have to, because at least for me, I'm often the first person, and I've done this now for 22 years of running up, and I'm the first person they've talked to. And so you get this wild study in human reaction where you see grief go through the stages really, really quickly. People treat natural disasters, whether it's fire, flood, tornado, I've seen all of it, and humans react the same. There's a beauty to it, because I think I work in the field of mental health a lot because of my journey that I've had, but I always kind of say we should take notes from how people react to natural disasters, because I guess because everyone sees it, there's no running away like, oh, that didn't happen, right? Like we all know a tornado took your house. So then you have to process that part of it really quickly. but you watch someone go through the anger, the frustration, the sadness, the why did it happen to me, the why did I survive, and you are if you're someone who absorbs emotion pretty easily, I think that's a whole nother layer than just it was my job and they didn't hear me or whatever it was. And for me, the latest thing that I've been exposed to much more often, and probably because my eyes have been more open, I'm way past this is about science, way past this is about people, way past all of the things I did before. And now I'm like, wait, after Hurricane Michael, I was okay. I'm watching the thing that I forecast come true right where I am. And I know I'm in the eye wall of a Cat 5 and I'm going to be okay. But I'm watching homes do what I've only seen on videos and wash down the street, get ripped off their foundation and shred. And I'm thinking, I am in real time watching these people die. And it was very hard to watch that. But even worse, when I walked out and did, the next day, we ran into survivors along the way. And when I usually ask people, why didn't you leave? Or what, whether it was Jersey Shore for Sandy or some of the other Florida storms, usually it's like, oh, well, the last one didn't do it to us. They always have a story, or, it's usually a pretty plausible story, but it's kind of like, guys, that's why every mile counts. There's usually some sort of back and forth like this. In the panhandle of Florida with that Cat 5, every single person I met said, I don't have a car. I don't speak English. I didn't have a way out. I don't have family here. And the level of privilege that I even attacked storms with from the front end was really challenged. And now I see that because my eyes are open to it much more. And it's not a choice in a lot of these ways. And what I think the why of what I do, that started to take on, well, how do we do the rescue before the rescue? If I'm there and I know how to be safe, how is that building not available to every other person who could have walked there because they didn't need a car? How did we not knock on doors? Like all of that. And so I started talking, and I do a show called Hearts of Heroes, and I've talked to a lot of emergency responders and emergency managers about what that looks like. And I hope to be a part of that solution. And that helps those feelings later too.
That post-disaster response is a big one. I feel like we could do a whole webinar just on that for sure, because it's probably different for everyone in the various roles represented in this conversation. But I know, Ginger, you have to run. Thank you very much for your time with us today. It was wonderful chatting with you, and good luck in your travels this week and in your coverage. Any final thoughts that you want to share before you drop off here?
Yeah, I think the other thing is, this is just advice I like to share, is we don't have to be one thing. So if you already are doing something else, or you have never storm chased, or you've never thought about meteorology, but you want to, my 71-year-old mother just passed her boards, her first level of medical boards, because she finally went back and did the thing that she wanted to do. I think it's never too late. And it's, I have this like inspiration in front of me to say that, but it's also the story we tell ourselves often is the label that we allow other people to put on ourselves, but more importantly, the one that we keep. So try to rip that off. I was told forever, early in my writing career at 7th grade, that maybe writing's not your thing. And I let that go with me the whole time, thinking I wasn't a writer. Oh yeah, I'm really good at math and science, but I'm not good at that. Turns out I can write, because then I finally did 30 years later, and I wrote 5 books, and 2 of them were New York Times bestsellers. And I'm writing another one right now with National Geographic. And you can do whatever you say you can do. So keep doing that. Thank you.
Love it. Thanks, Ginger. We'll see you online soon.
Thanks, Ginger.
All right. So I want to switch a little bit to mechanics. We got a lot of questions, for example, from Christina and Meg B around how do you decide what storms to chase? How do you know where to chase them? How do you know when to start the chasing process versus sitting still? How do you determine the best place to be, and all of that type of stuff? We don't have time in our remaining kind of 15 minutes, but I would like to make a repeat quick plug. We do offer a remote storm chasing 101 training called Spring Training. It's at the beginning of every spring, right on time for storm chasing season. And I will share that QR code for you to get more information on spring training just real quick one more time. The short answer is it takes forecasting knowledge, understanding of modeling, how to understand surface observations in real time and read things like radar and satellite. This training will get you kind of at the foundational level of how to do all of those things. So I definitely recommend checking it out. We purposely keep it remote, and we record everything so that it's accessible to everyone. It is highly subsidized so that it's accessible to everyone cost-wise as well. That's one reason that we like to keep it remote. And there's some great folks to learn from who come and present at our spring training. The other place that I would definitely recommend if you're not able to participate in this is our education resources page. And we'll pop that in the chat for you. It's girlswhochase.com/education. It's a list a mile long of a ton of free resources that you can use to learn how to start your storm chasing journey. So we also offer Spring Training 2024 and Spring Training 2023, which is kind of a library of resources. So if you want to get started now, like I did with just studying away, please, by all means, don't let us stop you. There's just tons to be learned here. And the other thing, frankly, is following storm chasers and learning from them, learning how they chase, learning the choices that they make. A lot of them share that information as they're going through their storm chasing process. So that's a great way to learn from other people. Tons of ways to get started in this area. But I thought what we could do is just kind of go round robin and talk about, I know everybody kind of has their favorite thing for decision making here. Mel, what's your go-to for making kind of a high level go, no go storm chasing decision?
As far as forecasting?
As in terms of like whether you decide, yes, I'm going out tomorrow, or no, I'm going to sit this one out.
Well, there are definitely a lot of different factors that come into play when I'm making a decision as to whether or not to chase a setup. And that actually happened recently in Minnesota, where we had a slight risk and a cold front coming through. And you can look at the forecasting models as we get closer to the day of. I'm usually looking at the high resolution rapid refresh model, which is common for the short-term forecasting because it refreshes more frequently and it's a little more accurate the closer we get to the event. So as I'm using that model, getting closer to the day of, if it's close enough that I can do a one-day chase, that's going to be a different decision-making process than if I have to travel to Kansas, I'll have to leave the day before. So I really prefer to wait until the morning of the chase if I can, because the closer we get, the more accurate the model data is. And it still doesn't mean it's going to play out exactly like the model is showing. In Minnesota, the other day, the HRRR was showing this line of storms going up, supercells, all the way from like northern Minnesota down to southern Minnesota. And it actually wasn't showing anything in northern Minnesota. Actually, for a while there, it was only showing convection as far as the convection goes. There's a lot of other factors, obviously, like we're not going to talk about today, but that I'll look at in forecasting. But as far as what that model was showing, a lot of people do look at the convective allowing models, meaning they're going to show you what radar might look like later on or the next day. And that can help in the decision-making process if you don't know a lot of other things to look at, because it's taking into account all those different parameters that we look at when forecasting, just to summarize that piece. So as far as the parameters being in place, there were good parameters for supercells and tornadoes. Now, the model was not showing any convection occurring in northern Minnesota, but it was showing pretty decent convection in the southern half. And I decided to go out and chase. And I know somebody actually who was in northern Minnesota and went to southern Minnesota. And it turned out that where the better parameters were that day, we had tornadoes up in northern Minnesota, even though the model wasn't showing storms developing before dark. But they did. So there's so many things that can happen. It's not only the model data, but also I decide sometimes based on my gut feeling, having been chasing for over 24 years now, just kind of based on like what the atmosphere is like, how cloudy it seems to be that day, even if the models aren't showing it's going to be a cloudy day, because if it's cloudy, it can affect things. And really just also, okay, so not only that, but yeah, maybe looking at the setup, and if it looks similar to another day in the past that I've chased that was a really good day, that might influence me to want to go out. If it looks like it's kind of iffy, I might not just want to. And it's also going to depend on just how I feel that day. Do I really want to drive 5 hours or like 10 hours today? Or am I tired and I just don't feel like it? So when I was going out though recently in Minnesota, I was thinking about all these different things that I use to determine whether or not and where I'm going to chase. So that day I decided, okay, I'm going to go out there. It's close enough to home. I'm not too tired. Even if I end up down on the border of Iowa, I can do this today. So I was out there not really exactly sure where I was targeting, because sometimes it can be hard to pick an exact target when you have multiple storms that might develop. And it was just interesting to really notice how a lot of my previous experience came into play on this day. A lot of people got suckered into an early storm that got messy and didn't do much. And I was like, no, it's too early. I'm going to wait. And then I really want to be on the boundary. I don't like the prefrontal storms. They're usually not as good as storms right on the boundary. So all these different things, again, just from experience and education and like the knowledge I have to really determine exactly where I'm going to go. And I ended up on a pretty nice supercell, and there weren't many people on that one. That didn't last very long, but still it happened. And it was really somewhat luck. A lot of chasing there's an element of luck, especially when you have multiple storms. So you can be out there and there can be several storms producing tornadoes or just really beautiful storm structure. And one to the north might produce better one day, one to the south another day. And there's a lot of parameters in play there too as well. But sometimes you just have to get out there and like go to the area that looks good. Some days you won't see anything. Some days you're going to see the best storm there is, no matter how good of a forecaster you are. Sometimes you'll be in the right place, sometimes you won't. So it's what I like is the challenge. So really, a lot of times determining whether or not I'm going to chase depends on how I'm feeling that day, like how far I want to drive, and how good the forecast looks.
Yeah, not a simple answer, it turns out.
I hope I didn't ramble too long.
This is why we have mentoring programs and trainings and all of this kind of stuff, because there's a lot that goes into a successful chase. And at the end of the day, hopefully a photo of something you're actually out there to witness. Karen, what's your kind of quick, actually, for example, let's say that you all are deciding whether today's a day to get the dowels out and get the team out in the field. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, it depends if we have money. I can't,
yes.
Yeah, I can't, hide that. I mean, I'm sure that plays into a lot of people's chase, factors too. I mean, How much money do you have to do that? Same thing applies for research. Yeah, so, I mean, it also then depends what you're, trying to go get out there. So if we're doing, a lot of low-level wind tornado missions, we're sort of looking for slow storm motions that are crossing roads. So we're not really looking to go to Cherry County. So a lot of times we bias somewhere that might have more roads, given the choice. I mean, again, it's sort of what your objectives are, what you're trying to do. I mean, so like I said, we're looking for, slow moving tornadoes hitting a well-engineered ghost town. Which if you find that, please let me know where that is. Yeah, so I mean, that's a big thing. Obviously you could chase everything, and some people have the money and resources to chase everything. And certainly if you chase everything, you don't miss a lot. Obviously you still sometimes miss. But a lot of times we try to chase higher end systems, that are coming through, that are sort of well predicted. And I don't know who hates this, and they think everybody hates this term. I'm going to use it anyway. We're not trying to chase mesoscale accidents. No. When you see, when you start thinking mesoscale accidents in the forecast, no, but, sort of higher end, systems that aren't, totally dependent on, 7 things coming together in order for it to happen. Again, not that it doesn't happen, but predictability a lot of times on those things can be pretty low. So if you're trying to decide where to spend your resources, and how to best spend your resources. And that's our equation for particular objectives.
And Liz, this is like a whole separate conversation, so I'll just let you maybe choose a favorite.
Well, I mean, the first things I have to ask myself is, am I working? And then, similar to what Melanie said, how far? So, I have a crazy schedule. I have 2 little kids, and I am not willing to drive, 12 hours one way to get to a Target. I just don't have the time for that. And so if it's something pretty much within like Oklahoma or North Texas, the Panhandle, sure. But a big thing for me, and again, this goes back to what Karen said about what's your objective. I am what the kids like to call a structure hipster. So storm mode is really important to me. I'm not chasing some junky mess. Yeah, I don't want to get caught up in something that's sloppy and you can't see anything. Things like that. I want some isolated cells that, like Karen said, are slow moving, and look beautiful both close up and from afar. So those are some of the basic things that I'm thinking about if I'm thinking about going out and chasing.
Got it. And it's usually the combination of all of the resources that we're sharing right now in the chat that helps us make those decisions and that we train folks on. So we're reaching close to time here. So I think I'd like to wrap by just asking all of you, and we'll start with Karen, because I know she's been very patiently sitting in a car waiting to go do what she needs to be here with us. Any last thoughts, any advice? Is there one thing that you feel like you haven't said that you want to make sure folks hear from you about breaking into the weather space or participating in the weather space, or, engaging with folks?
Sure. I'm usually stealing other people's answers. So no, I think there's been a lot of good discussion here. I mean, sort of follow your arrow, quote Casey Musgraves. No, but sort of follow, what you want to do. I mean, there's no one size fits all for people. There's a lot of different ways to participate in the weather community. And also there's a lot of different people in the weather community. So if you don't connect with, certain people or certain communities, that's not a problem. There's other communities that you probably will connect with. So I think just, be true to yourself and pursue what you want to pursue and find the people, in the community that you resonate with. And I think that's a good path forward. Obviously keep learning. I mean, I'm always, learning. I feel like, this hurricane forecast is a great learning experience yet again. But, I mean, God, the day you stop learning too, I mean, that's a sad day. So, always make sure that you're, learning things that you're interested in.
That's a good one for sure, especially when it comes to weather. Sure is a humbling experience. Liz, how about you?
I think the biggest thing is just believe in yourself. I know that sounds cheesy, but there's going to be people who support you and help you. There are also going to be people that tell you you can't. Don't let those people determine your path. You determine your path. You know what you want. So find the people that are going to help you get there and surround yourself with them, and ignore everyone else because their opinion doesn't matter.
Amen. Good point. Any final thoughts, Mel?
Well, I think what was said by Karen and Elizabeth was great. And also what Ginger said earlier about it's never too late. That comes into play in my life a lot. Throughout my 24 years of storm chasing, there have been times I've been very actively involved and on the road a lot, and there are times where I only go out locally. And it depends on what's going on in my life and what's a priority at that time, because obviously storm chasing isn't the only thing I do. And if you're interested in chasing or witnessing severe weather, getting involved in weather as a career, just go after whatever your dreams are and connect with the right people to take you in that direction. Don't be afraid to get out there and just get involved and ask, as was said earlier. I think that's the most important thing. And also not taking things personally. I think a lot of us, even if we don't connect, if we try to connect with someone and it doesn't work out, it's not personal. Just move on to that next person and next community till you find what works for you. It's a journey. Life is a journey. Storm chasing is a journey. And some days are amazing. Some days are difficult and challenging and exhausting. If you have any questions for me personally, send me an email. Have different emails, but my website is what?
I said, do not send Melanie a DM on social media.
If you send me a message on Facebook, I might not get to it for a long time. I'm going to try to improve, but I say that all the time. So Melanie Metz stormchasing.com, you can, my contact information's there. But I would be happy to connect if you want to connect. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you all very much. I will hand it now back to Gideon to wrap us up, but just wanted to say a big thank you to our panelists for their time and insight. Much appreciated.